Most people don't like work, and there's good reasons for that.
Maybe a small percentage do, and for those people what work's a very good experience for them, but the majority of people know they come to work because they have to come to work.
People just aren't happy working, and you're here for such a great amount of time in a day and in your life, and it should be as enjoyable, and so you get as much out of it as possibly, as you can.
Well, society is always changing, and I feel that one of the important things about governments and people who have a responsibility to govern large organisations that impact on society is to ensure that they keep some sort of pace with the changes occurring in society.
Well, I think the initiative is coming from a number of sources. It's coming from unions, it's coming from workers themselves, it's coming from management, it's coming from government, and it's coming from the economic and social environment in which we're living. Industrial democracy is really about a different approach to handling economic and managerial problems.
I guess as workers we've traditionally just want to protect our jobs. But we've gone about it in a different manner. We've gone about it with logs of claims and price, wage rises and that sort of stuff. We're now looking at protecting our future through being the actual management of it ourselves.
Consequently, industrial democracy is not just a nice thing to talk about at a few seminars, but is really about the future development of workers' role in the workplace over the ensuing generations.
If it's successful and we get it off the ground, I'm actually going to have a say in how I want to do my job, and I think that is the real and most important thing.
The greatest single obstacle would be the individual's fear of change, and really none of us know what's down the track the next day, let alone having some people trying to put together a plan that's going to come together 5 or 6 years away.
The issues of work and change affect us all. Through collective decision-making and shared objectives, industrial democracy is a process to develop more humane and more efficient workplaces. But there are many unanswered questions. In this program, we look at a discussion taking place at a government factory. The initial phase of industrial democracy was introduced here by their former minister, Brian Howe. Those who have already been involved in industrial democracy, and those who soon may be, attempt to work out what the introduction of such a concept really means. They are learning as they go, drawing on past experience and practices with a view to creating new and more effective ways of working. Before we began filming, the meeting saw films on industrial democracy as a discussion starter.
So, who's first?
Yeah, Norbert Jansen, Team C. If a small section wants to get involved in industrial democracy and more autonomy, what should these people really do? How is that little step to start it off? How do you do that?
I'll grab the bull by the horns, and the very first step is one, to get an approved meeting to decide collectively that you wish to go to some form of an industrial democracy concept. Once then you've decided, then you can either elect a delegation to approach management. Now, as a grievance procedure has set out, you start at the lowest level possible. Well, I would say that you'd do away with that, simply because what's your foreman going to say, or what's your supervisor going to say? Oh yeah, I agree with that, but not yet. You know what I mean? So what I would say is you approach him, yes, but approach him to let him know that you wish to take it up with a higher up area, and I would say that would be the industrial office, and from there it would get referred higher up to your manager, which you come under, and then a meeting is set up, and then you thrash it all out, and I mean you've started.
All right, Charlie, thank you. Yes, Jim.
Charlie, I think you contradicted yourself there, but because when you said, of course, you can go approach the foreman and the superintendent, but you're all to do just to advise them that you're going to hire management. That means you're not the guys who are going to do this sort of thing. They're not introducing industrial democracy. They are not discussing with their superiors. They are going even to even higher seniority. Now, to me, that is a contradiction to industrial democracy itself.
Can I just come in there, Jim? If I may, I think Charlie opened his comments by saying, I'm going to grab the bull by his horn, so he's led off. I'm sure Charlie does mean if a group of employees want to discuss any matter of the work, obviously the foreman's involved. You don't have a discussion unless you involve the whole team, and the foreman's part of that team.
Industrial democracy basically recognises the right of every individual to participate in decision-making processes, and equal treatment for all employees, whether they be managers or shop floor personnel in a particular factory.
Instead of work coming down through the traditional sort of hierarchy of where a foreman would be told that a certain job had to be done, and then he would delegate it out to his leading hands, and the leading hands would then go and give it to individuals, whether perhaps we could give a group of work to a group of people, and then they can then decide on who does what particular part of that job and in what order and so forth, to try to give them more responsibility, and so by putting more into the work they'll also get more out of it. Probably the people sort of who are a bit against it would sort of be the leading hands and the foremen, who tend to see it as a bit of a threat, and I think there's some sort of communist plot, if you will, but that's, we try to alleviate their fears, and hopefully we can give them sort of further responsibilities of actual being like a resource sort of person or a super tradesman type sort of figure where he can help them and assist them in any way.
We'll just finish this discussion with Jim. Do you want to make a further point?
Now, at the moment, at the present state, us foremen, we have no authority of discipline whatsoever at this stage, right? But we want to know who's going to maintain this discipline, because without it, you can bring Jesus Christ himself, because he still wants to organize this place.
All right. Ryan, do you want to respond to that?
The only way that will occur, where you'll get discipline, is when you've got industrial democracy, because as a result of industrial democracy, you'll have job satisfaction. If you've got job satisfaction, people don't play up.
The most important issue is to accept that workers have the skills and have the right to be involved in making decisions. That workers are committed to the improvement of efficiency, understanding, wish to be involved. That's the essential part of industrial democracy, that you essentially trust that workers wish to be involved and can make a practical contribution in their involvement, that they are just not machines, they are people who really do wish to make a contribution to improving lifestyles.
Charlie, I'd like to ask you if in your teamwork, have you addressed the new structure or special resources at all for the Industrial Democracy Education Unit?
No.
Can I ask then if the General Manager's given any thought to that?
We would hope to evolve a resource situation where the whole factory in effect provides the resource. I don't expect that industrial democracy, if it is to be thoroughly approached, thoroughly introduced, is without its resources right from the start. You're the resource.
And if you walk out onto the shop floor into an office and ask a person what's industrial democracy, they look at you blankly. So I think you've got to really sort of educate the people first on what it means, how it can affect their jobs, the possible benefits for them.
So I guess the biggest problem would be information access, communication, some sort of communication system that works, and an educational awareness program on what the social and environmental, industrial changes are going to be. You know, what we're all involved in some way or another.
I think I've learned that you must give people the choice whether they want to be involved in it. You must ensure that they can make an educated decision of whether they want to be involved. That's hence our education unit educating people in industrial democracy.
Well, when is the education process due to be completed?
When the workforce lets the education unit know that the education process no longer is required.
So again, the responsibility
is back on the workforce.
All right, thank you, Charlie. Who'd like to respond to that? Norman?
I think what Charlie really is saying is it's an education process. And as you all know, we never finished learning. So there is no end to the introduction of industrial democracy, I would think. I would think it's an ongoing process and it will go on and on and on forever.
One of the basic problems in dealing with work and change can be our inability to fully understand the issues that affect us. At this dockyard, there is another vital method for communication and learning. The approach here is to develop educational and cultural activities in the workplace. Paddy Garrity.
With industrial democracy, a lot of these attitudes have changed. But it's no good just bringing in industrial democracy and trying to change the industrial relations sector of the workforce. You have to look at the other needs of workers and recognise that they're human beings and they have needs in the field of arts, education and recreation. This is the Williamstown Dockyard Worker Office. We try to create a communication between the workforce and the management, but more in particularly to let the workers know what is going on in the yard. And one of the first things they said was, well, how do we get some publicity about health and safety out to the workforce? So they decided on a mural. And the whole idea was that what we would do would bring in outside experts to teach the workers how to paint and create the mural, so that the art that we were creating was art in the working life. Workers actually created this stuff. From then we went on to producing a newspaper, also with heavy emphasis on publicity about health and safety.
2 or 3 squares, isn't it?
Oh yeah, quite easily.
That's what we did last
Belongs to the deepest depths. Now we know. Asbestos, it's okay, we breathe it.
This theatre group is made up of both white and blue.
The white collar and blue collar, I mean, we weren't the first ones to do it, but there's a lot of other people been doing it. But seeing two opposing forces 2 years ago, these two kinds of people would have been sort of at each other's necks, but now they're sort of, they say good day.
They sort of treat you more like you're one of them, and it just works better. People are they are definitely breaking down the barriers. So
What we also do here is we've organised art and educational courses from here. We've got 4 educational courses. That's Margaret English, Literacy for Australian Workers, a creative writing course have also just been run, and now we're doing an English expression course for people who haven't written since they left school at 14. Well, we had a disaster here for a number of years in this dockyard. In 1981 we lost 7.5% of total man hours. Absenteeism was outrageous, and industrial accidents were also something shocking. If employers treat their workers as human beings, then get a natural increase in productivity. I think that is all happening in this dockyard. The figures for lost time accidents has just gone down dramatically. Our absenteeism has gone down dramatically, and our figures from industrial stoppages has gone down from 7.5% of total man hours in 1981 to way down below the metal industry average at the current time.
That it's not true to say that people only work for a buck. They work for personal satisfaction. That people get really angry if they have skills and they see that the work they do de-skills them. That people do not by nature want to be irresponsible or not have accountability. That people actually get really hyped up about work where they know that they're accountable and can be responsible. That if organizations treat people like children, then they'll end up with a childish workforce, and that childish workforce will be reaction.
Dennis Turner, Machine Shop. We saw a film on the Dynavac firm, who have very close relationships with their staff. How far is it intended that this factory should go along those lines?
That's the company where they all sort of decide who's going to be hired and who's going to be fired, that sort of thing. Well, as our group is only an education unit, the ball is back in your court yet again. It's up for you to decide what lines you want to take if you want to go that far, or whether that job will be left up to personnel people.
Can I just add something? What may work in one section may not work in another section, even though they could be only separated by a line. So I would say that it'd be inappropriate to just transfer or superimpose what happens at Dynavac into Gaff. But that's also saying that if people in the factory want that system, well, that's industrial democracy, isn't it?
Brad Yellen from Design and Development. I'd just like to ask Rowan, I think it'd be best to answer the question. Nothing's been said about engineers' participation in this. I'd just like to know how we're supposed to fit into it.
As far as I'm concerned, we're part of this factory and we ought to have the same constraints as the production areas do have. And collectively we'll decide and develop our processes. And I'm sure that's what's going to happen in most of the other professional areas of the factory.
Could the panel tell us that the industrial democracy concept has been working for some considerable time in the RAAF repair area? Has it been successful in terms of an increased turnaround rate of those repairs?
What I hear is that it is vastly improved. Everybody's a lot more happy. Everybody is having a little bit to contribute to the situation. For example, they spend about 5 to 10 minutes in the morning looking at the drawings before they even attempt the job. And everybody's ideas and thoughts go to how they're going to do it and how they're going to achieve it in the time which is designated as being available to do that task in.
The way the factory was running, we didn't like it, because we're getting further and further away from the foremen and the management. So we thought we'll keep together, and then we decided, well, why don't we try this industrial democracy, what they've been talking about. And that way we said we'll keep the guys together, we involved the foremen and the inspectors, and that way we got more close relationship, and it's been working really well. We've got our ups and downs, but we overcome that.
Coming to work, it's like a challenge now. It's not like the old boring system where you come before and the foreman will tell you, do this job. No, I want you to do this one first before that one, blah, blah, you know. We got a task ahead of us to complete and accomplish, try and get some kind of profit into this place. Put it this way, I haven't taken a single day off this year yet.
They do the job far more efficiently, in fact easier. Is that correct?
Under the guise of the semi-autonomous work group, GAF has never been able to achieve 10 sets of canopy repairs in a quarter, which they did do under the semi-autonomous working environment.
Because each factory's got different needs on industrial democracy, each factory will have to work out its own plans. For example, at GAF, we perceived the need to go into semi-autonomous work groups on the shop floor. Perhaps some other factories mightn't want to go that way, so it's up to each individual factory.
I'd like to ask what controls you would see being instigated whereby people are not assuming that we're just exchanging one management for another, such as the unions taking over as surrogate management.
It's not a question of control. It's not a question of unions taking over. It's not a question of management taking over. It's a question of total participation in the workforce for the utilisation of every human resource that's in that workforce.
Has no conflict with unions if the instrument by which industrial democracy is implemented is through the union. Unions are a vital element of industrial democracy. If the basic organisation is through the union movement, then obviously there is no conflict.
And I think that the sorts of changes that we should be involved in now is ensuring that unions have a place in the decision-making process at the very earliest part, so that they and their members, their skills and their knowledge are tapped from the beginning.
There are areas within GAF where the union, the workers are not union members. Now, how do you see contribution from such non-unionists? Or are we in actual fact saying that we're looking for 100% union membership before we proceed?
There is a majority of people in unions, so it just seems to be easier to use a structure that's already there. And anyone in the factory can go to that project team and input information, ideas, anything. You don't have to be a union member.
Costas Christodoulis from Quality Assurance. Viewing the films this morning, we've seen a lot of participation by unions, exchanging roles, by limiting demarcation disputes, and a lot of interchange of skills between different trades or different areas of work. And what will the future hold? Will there be less union demarcation disputes, more interchange of personnel between managing areas, work-related areas?
Within this organisation, we have the problem of practice, past practice. You've got to also at the same time, different unions having their own, protecting their own vested interests. That is going to require a hell of a lot of close negotiation, consultation, and how we achieve that, only time will tell.
Probably the biggest problem is that there's no one industry union. There's probably about 20 unions on area here. Now, for all those unions to sit down and come to agreement on how an industrial democracy program is going to work in GAF is going to be very difficult.
I don't think there's any easy solution. It's going to take a lot of work between the unions firstly, and then between unions and management to resolve it, because I believe the benefits are there for both unions and management.
It's not the unions or management's job to say, yes, this is demarcation. It's the member's job. If you as a member decide that, yes, job rotation's a good idea, and the factory as a whole say it's a good idea for getting experience, well then, that's what will go ahead. Because no matter what you decide, if you decide it, the unions must go along with it, and so must management. Because industrial democracy is the responsibility of the individual in a working group. And once the people make up their mind and take that responsibility, whether it's hard or soft or easy, that's the way it'll go.
I would like to know now if industrial democracy, whether we are educating all these people, whether they are willing to go ahead with it, whether they are genuine, because unless it's 100% from both parties, we're not going to achieve it.
Your last few words were absolutely right and absolutely on the ball, and in fact is very heartening to hear. We don't get 100% of people being aware of what industrial democracy is about and attempting within their own limits to interpret it correctly, then there's no point in starting the program at all.
It's got to be demystified for people to understand what's going on. If it's not demystified, it'll always remain an academic exercise that people won't go for. And people really got to understand what it means.
The fact remains, though, that everybody is given the opportunity to participate in it, to express their views, and out of that should emerge as near to the correct solution to any problem as can be achieved. And that's life, isn't it?
If you can carry that discussion back into your workplaces and start generating some real discussion, that's what the education process is all about, getting people to talk about those concepts and ideas so that everybody is ready. All of you for being here, for a terrific discussion.
We are just beginning to explore the issues raised in this discussion. There is no one right way. Sharing information, as we have seen, provides a start to this process of change. It is by participating in collaborative decision-making on meaningful issues that we can continue the process of making work more democratic, contributing to the productivity and satisfaction of all the workforce.
Industrial democracy is not a soft option. It's not the warm inner glow that some people would like to pretend. It's a very hard negotiating process if it is to be done properly.
The people who've become excited about the process of change and then go back to the ordinary way in which work is done realize far more strongly than they did before the stultifying effect of boredom at work. And they're much more frustrated by going back to an old method after experiencing a new. So that once, in fact, change has begun to occur, it must go on. We cannot go back because people will not put up with it. So once people, I think, see the possibility of change and begin to experience it, then organisations have got to recognise that that will have a snowballing effect, and have got to be courageous. I think a lot of courage is going to be needed to ensure that the changes continue.